Hello, everyone. Thanks to everyone that's filled out some of the survey questions. So I saw there was one person that pulled to, have more information about the concept of the sensor. So I'm going to go ahead and try to address that in this video. I'm not 100% sure what you meant by concept, so I'm kind of making an assumption, but if this is wrong, it might be helpful to other people, but go ahead and actually feel free to, correct me or tell me, what you wanted in particular, but there you go. So what I'm going to talk about right now is the concept behind GelSight for 3D reconstruction. So what I'm going to talk about first is this geometric, ray-based physics. And so we'll start off with a light source here, a camera, and a metal surface. And this metal surface in particular is a smooth surface, so like a mirror finish. And as most of you probably already know, that if you have a light source with rays coming in and hitting it, depending on the normal of the surface, the light rays will bounce in a certain direction, like this. And so the next thing to mention about GelSight is that we have a soft sensor, and it's obvious that you can't really have a soft mirror, or at least I haven't seen a soft mirror. That would be interesting to see if it exists. What we have to use instead are these aluminum paints that, if you look at their microgeometry under a microscope, they kind of look like this. So we have two different variants that we usually use. The first variant that we use is this aluminum silver dollar. And aluminum silver dollar is just, you get some aluminum, you break it up into little particles, and then you run it through a ball mill, and it gives you these nice, pretty smooth surfaces. And the other variant that we use for our sensors is this pigment that's made out of just aluminum powder, where you just grind out aluminum powder until it's like a few microns. And with this, instead of having these smooth surfaces, what we get instead are these random shapes. So what we're going to look at is the behavior of the light when it actually hits these type of microgeometries. So the left image here corresponds to the silver dollar, and the right image here will correspond to the aluminum powder. So when the light hits the aluminum powder, it's going to mostly behave like a mirror, but it has a few flaws in it. So the little silver dollars don't lay perfectly flat with each other. They kind of stack on each other to make a staircase. Or when you put them into the clear silicone paint, they might not actually orient in the right direction, so they might just be sticking straight up out of the silicone or in the silicone. And so you get a little bit of variance in terms of how the light travels when it hits the surface, but overall, the behavior that you expect with this kind of microgeometry is when a ray hits, it goes in this general direction, but there's a little bit of variance, like here where there might be a staircase, or here there might just be a particle in the silicone sticking out. On the other hand, when we actually look at the aluminum powder instead, when the light comes in and it starts hitting it, because there's just so much random geometry associated with that aluminum powder, when light hits, it's just going to go in any direction. It can go in, it might be lucky and travel in the direction that you normally would want it to go. If it was like a mirror, it might go at a steeper angle because it got lucky and hit a slope like this, or just hit something like this, went straight up, and then there might be scenarios where it hits the surface and it bounced like right back in the opposite direction that was initially traveling. And when we actually have this and we look at it with a camera, what happens is the camera is a discrete thing. It doesn't perceive every single ray. And what it does instead is, for each little area on your surface, it's bent into a single pixel, like this. So down here, there's your images where each of these little boxes correspond to a pixel. And when there's no deformation to the surface, the light travels, hits the surface, and it will bounce into this direction. And then there's these cases because, with our silver dollar, there's some variance in the surface. Some of the rays will hit the surface and then bounce directly at the camera when it's at this normal state or its flat state. And so what that means is because there's a ray that hit the surface here and bounced to the camera, when you look at the image, there's going to just be a very dark red pixel. But for the most part, it's going to be blackish. And then now, when you actually, press something into the surface, what happens is these rays kind of get directed, and they're originally traveling in this kind of general direction, but now that there's a new surface normal here, now the rays are directed more towards the eye. And so when the eye looks at this, before it just saw like this faint red pixel here, but now it's going to be a bright red pixel. And then now we have this issue when you actually make deformation with the surface. You're going to lose all of the information over here if you just had a single LED. So what you would want to do is you want to have another LED of a different color. And when it comes in, hits the surface, it's going to reflect into the eye too. And in this case, there's a lot of curvature here that will direct the light right into the camera. And so for this pixel here, you'll see a really bright green pixel. And if you want to go and think of this from a 3D approach, you wouldn't have 2 LEDs, but you would actually have 3 LEDs instead, so that you can actually get information about the other axis. And now, when we look at the image, what we can do is we can look at the intensity of each color at each pixel. So we have red and we have green. This green's really bright. And what we're going to do is we're going to say when we see this shade of green, we're going to say that's 45 degrees. And when we see this shade of red, this bright shade of red here, we're going to say it's negative 45 degrees. And the other pixels, they're just black, so there's no angle associated with them. But what we're going to do with the GelSight sensor to get 3D reconstruction is we're going to build either a lookup table where it says, if I have this shade of green, that corresponds to this angle, and so forth. Or we have a neural network, and that neural network, we input the RGB pixel, and then it's going to output what it thinks the surface normal is. And so once we've converted the pixel colors to actual gradient estimations, what we can go ahead and do is just have forward integration where we'll start by specifying a boundary here, where we'll say, okay, it's going to start at the flat level of the sensor here, and it's going to end at the this part of the sensor as well at this level. And we can just do a forward shooting method, where we say we know the length that this pixel corresponds to, and we know its angle, so we can just go ahead and step forward at this angle. Then we have now our bright green pixel, 45 degrees, step up, and then this is 0 again, so we don't have any upward or downward step, and then downward step, and so forth until we reach the end of our image. And when we do this, what we can actually now do is approximate the actual deformation that was happening at the surface. And so you can kind of see that this would probably approximate your deformation pretty well. And as you increase the resolution of your image, what you'll have is a better approximation of the deformation of your surface. And just so you can actually see, what an image of these two different pigments actually look like. The left is the silver dollar, and you can kind of see it's kind of like a nice reflector. When the light comes in and it hits it, you get this nice green area, you get this nice red area, you get a nice blue area, and in this case of this sensor, you get this really nice white area. And then with aluminum powder, there's this interesting characteristic that when light hits it, it gets diffused in all of these directions. And so when you look at an image of a surface with these aluminum powders, then you get a really nice kind of rainbow circle thing where you have a smooth gradient going around. And so historically, most of the GelSight sensors have resorted to using this aluminum powder because you do have this smooth function where you can say, at this pixel we have this gradient, and then the neighbor smoothly transitions into another gradient. But when you look at the aluminum silver dollar, it just has, because it's reflecting back the light pretty harshly, it has really harsh boundaries at the edges, and it's not smooth. So it's a little bit more difficult in actually estimating the gradient of the aluminum silver dollar. So that's why we've typically avoided using these kind of pigments. But in terms of actually making a curved finger, we want this kind of bouncing around, and so the aluminum silver dollar pigment is actually advantageous for the sensor for this paper. And we'll talk about that more. But yeah, thanks for listening to this. I'll go more into the design of the sensor now that you have this kind of primer about the microgeometry of the surface, and then actually walk through the actual design of it. But I hope this helps answer some of your questions about the concept. If it doesn't, go ahead and feel free to send a message on Slack saying that I actually don't quite understand this and want this explained a little bit more. But yeah, thanks for listening.